So if you know your cockpits, you probably guessed that this is an F-15, and specifically I can tell you it's also the F-15j, so it's the Japanese one, and we're playing it in sim, and we're fighting the Americans. Speaking of the Americans, we've just merged with an F-16. It is an Israeli F-16 Nets though, which has the Block 10 flight model, so it has the best flight model out of all of the F-16s. I take him into the vertical because it's a little bit too fast. Try and get a missile shot off here. I dodged one of his Pythons and his guns there. I just end up flaying it off. You can see I'm kind of losing speed here, even though we were kind of going downhill a little bit. Obviously, I'm going back uphill now, but it's kind of hard to maintain energy in this thing when you're full of fuel. I'm below 300 knots now at the top of the loop. I'm trying to sort of find some sort of advantage. I'm also trying to rate fight this guy, which probably wasn't the smartest idea. I start pre-flaring just in case he fires any missiles, and oh, he actually ends up gunning me down. So I wanted to show that clip in the beginning is because I think it's a very similar experience to what I imagine a lot of people flying the F-15 are having right now, especially in sim, and that is to, you fly around in it, you think you're in this big powerful aircraft, and then you find yourself at the merge, and after about a turn or two you're below 300 knots, you have no speed, and you just end up sort of sitting there and you get gunned down or missiled by an R-73 or whatever. Now the reason I say this is because the F-15 specifically, and by extension the flanker as well, is very sensitive to the fuel load, and it's because the F-15 as well as the flanker are very big aircraft, and which means they can carry a lot of fuel in them, similar to the F-14 actually. If you try and dogfight an F-14 on 60 minutes of fuel, it's not going to go well, but you try and rate that thing around the circle at 20 minutes, it becomes a completely different aircraft, and it's a similar story with the F-15. You just really need to, you really need to keep an eye on your fuel load, and 30 minutes is just, it's a little bit too much. Ideally, you want to be below 20 minutes of fuel. You can see I did just merge with an F-15, and I'm still, again, I'm on a high fuel load. I think I still had my external tanks on when I merged, but the reason I'm fighting him is because it's a similar aircraft. I saw someone fly behind me, and that's kind of why I broke off there, because I did see someone fly past my mirrors. I come around the circle anyway, I get into a head-on with this F-15, and I just end up gunning him down without any issues. Now I know BVR is kind of like a bit of a weird topic in War Thunder, just because it doesn't really work against someone who knows what they're doing, but there are a few tricks you can do, and BVR is always a good thing to do just after takeoff. You fly high, burn through some of your fuel, try and get rid of some of those radar missiles, because it's all weight at the end of the day, right, before you start dogfighting. The guy I'm locking up here, though, is flying close to the ground. As you can see, my missile just impacts the ground there, because he's too low, so I end up coming down kind of on top of him. Now, if he'd have pulled his nose up there, I just would have fired off another Sparrow. This way, this is kind of forcing him to stay low to the deck, and it allows me to just kind of drop on top of him and just sort of end up behind him and fire off one of my AM3s. It's a neat little trick you can do. It doesn't work all the time. Sometimes your opponent is just kind of too smart to fool for stuff like that, but it is something that you can do, and it's worth trying always. Now, if you're looking for people to play sim with, I do have a Discord server. I launched it last week with my last video, and I think we have about 60 or 70 members in it right now, which isn't actually that bad, I think, for a channel of my size within a week. We sit in there and we just talk about like playing stuff and War Thunder in general and sim and whatever like that, so it's a good place to like sort of find people. If you're interested in that kind of thing, you're more than welcome. The link is in the description. Now, you may be wondering why I'm playing on Denmark, because Denmark is actually kind of, I think Denmark's probably the worst map in sim. Sinai's pretty terrible as well, let's be honest, so is Smolensk, but actually Smolensk might be worse, if I'm being honest, because that map has like weird things with the lighting going on as well. But I chose Denmark because I specifically wanted to stay away from BVR type content, because I always just kind of naturally end up climbing, and I'm up at like 30,000 feet or whatever, and I'm lobbing sparrows down at people. Because multipathing is so easy to do on Denmark, and it's kind of easy to find people and whatever, due to the lack of terrain, I wanted to I was hoping that this would force more sort of within visual range engagements, and as you can see, I did just merge with an F-15. Because of the lack of terrain and everyone has these like super cool pulse Doppler radars, people generally do find each other very quickly. It ends up being kind of like a bit of an RB match, just without the the red markers or whatever, but the radars do kind of sit in place of that. As you can see, I did merge with an F-15 though, as I just said. I was a little bit too fast, and that's something you need to worry, like, or watch in this plane as well. It's very easy to just merge when you're too fast. Ideally, you want to be around 500 knots at the merge, which I think is about 900-ish kilometers an hour or something. Because otherwise, after the first turn, you're just going to end up blacking out. And the F-15 does kind of need to win that first turn against F-16s. I do realise most of the people that have F-15s probably have the American one, and obviously you're going to be fighting different opponents if you're flying that one. Here, I'm playing on the Russian side because I'm playing with Japan, and they can do that. So I do understand that most people watching this video with an F-15 are probably going to be facing stuff like flankers and MiG-29s. The reason I chose America is just because the games last night weren't that big. There weren't that many going on, even if it was Friday night, and fighting the American teams just kind of provide you with more enemies and stuff like that, so I ended up, I can end up getting more kills in the game and whatever. Plus, I don't think anyone's really struggling against Russian aircraft, to be honest, especially not on a map like Denmark or whatever. The R-73 is just not, it's not reliable enough for the amount that the flanker sort of relies on it, you know what I mean? The flight performance on the Russian aircraft generally isn't that good. I mean, it's kind of alright on the MiG-29 913s, the earlier MiG-29s. The flight performance on those really isn't that bad at all, but against anything else, you kind of, it's not the hardest fight in the world, let's say. In the footage here, you saw me just missile an F-15 after we kind of like merged, right? And I kind of came down on top of him, and then he just decided to fly off in a straight line, which is, I mean, I don't know why people do this. This guy isn't pre-flaring as well. So I ended up just firing off a missile at him, super easy kill. The thing is, the F-15 can kind of do this. It doesn't get TWS, it doesn't get helmet mounted sight, but it still gets invisible Fox 2 missiles, and they still work incredibly well against people, even people that know what they're doing and they're aware of your location, but especially against people that don't really know what they're doing, because they never think to pre-flare at all. Also, if you're gonna fly high, fly high. Don't fly sort of between 2,000 and 10,000 feet, because you just get what's gonna happen to you is exactly what's gonna happen to this F-14 here. Is someone on the deck is just gonna turn their nose at you and fire a Sparrow at you, whereas if you were up at 25,000 feet, the Sparrow would probably not have the range, you'd probably be a lot faster. Now, on my way back to base, I found out that an F-16 was actually kind of tailing me. You can see it on the LWR, he's also quite close. Now, if he had, he was tailing me for quite a while, so I figured, well, if he had Sparrows, he probably would have fired them at me by now, so I decided to turn around, try and identify him. The radar wasn't quite fast enough. I tried and pretty flare a little bit, because you never know with the M9Ms. I didn't want to ACM him, obviously, because I didn't know if he was enemy or friendly. Turns out he's shooting at me, so probably enemy. Obviously the blue name didn't pop up as we merged. I'm a little bit fast here. Also, as I go nose down, try not to black out. Obviously you want to get the nose around as quick as possible in these kind of fights, but it's always kind of tough to do if you're really fast, because you will end up blacking out, and speed control is very, very important at top tier. I thought he was going to gun me again, so I decided to just kind of roll out this nose, which isn't a bad idea to do. However, I'm at the top of the loop now. I'm really, really super slow. I'm also kind of heavy on fuel again. I'm about 28 minutes, which isn't ideal for the F-15, but this guy doesn't seem to really be that amazing. I'm at 250 knots, 220 knots now, by the way. And I decide, okay, screw it, this is an F-15, it can kind of sit on its engine, so I'm just going to try and pull out another vertical. And what actually ends up happening is I didn't know that I was expecting the nose to kind of drop back down, but for some reason I just end up parking the thing here, and I don't know, like, physics wise what's happening here, but I end up kind of, the nose does eventually come down. He doesn't really know what the hell's going on. He thinks I'm about to turn into him, so he actually ends up running away. I try and fire off an AM3 there just because it was out of range, obviously, on the radar as well, you can see that, but I thought, you never know, maybe he's slow or whatever. But yeah, that is something that actually happens in the F-15. You can kind of just almost like prop hang in a sense, right? It just stands, it's like it grows legs out of the back of its engine, and it just ends up standing there. So it's kind of a neat little party trick. I end up following him. I don't end up getting him though, but I do get one of his friends that was coming the opposite direction, and I just thought I'd include that in the clip. Could you just imagine though, like, if the F-15 actually had thrust vectoring though? Oh mate, I don't think I'd ever fly anything else. Now, I quite like this next clip because it's kind of what I would consider to be kind of like a true BVR fight as far as War Thunder goes. And as you can see, I'm getting locked up by an F-15 here. I'm just below 20,000 feet. I try and find him on radar. I end up putting the nose in the wrong direction here, but I do end up finding him as I can see his control over there. And I realise at this point, he's actually higher than me, so he has an energy advantage. So I try and lock him up, I get the missile off as fast as possible, even if it wasn't in as close as I would like to, and the missile probably isn't going to kill him if he starts doing defensive manoeuvres. I start getting into the crank, which means I put him on the gimbal limit of my radar, so my radar can't look over to the left as much anymore. But obviously, if I fly off to the side, it's going to increase the time that his missile's going to have to travel to me, right? Because it's going to increase the distance. I fire off a second missile there, and then I decide, okay, it's time to head back down to the deck. And what this is going to do is it's going to force his missile into thicker air, obviously down lower on altitude. And because it's War Thunder as well, the quicker you get to the deck, once you're at the deck, you're safe from radar missiles, just because the whole multi-pathing thing and stuff like that. So it is a bit of a shame, but as you can see, I do end up killing him here because he didn't do that, and you can hear his missile just kind of pass me there and fly into the ocean. In this next clip, you can see on the RWR that I'm being locked up by a question mark. Now, the question mark is going to be one of two things. It's either going to be a Mirage 4000 or it's going to be a Gripen. Now, I didn't see any French players in this game yet, so I'm assuming that this is going to be a Gripen. The Gripen's radar missile, as you can see, I'm getting a launch notification, is the RB-71, which is basically the Sky Flash, so it doesn't have a lot of range at all. So I end up climbing. I try and sort of bait him into pointing his nose, following me up there, kind of, so that my radar missile's going to hit him. But he doesn't end up falling through it. I think he actually ends up notching it here. I try to find him back on radar, but the second Sparrow just ends up getting trashed anyway. So I decide to fire off an AAM-3 there. He doesn't flare here, even though he should be. He's in a grip and he has unlimited of the damn things, but he doesn't, and it ends up getting him killed. I fire off a second one there, but obviously I didn't need to. But yeah, that's kind of like how you can, one way to deal with Gripens if the pilot in the Gripen isn't the smartest necessarily, right? You kind of just, you use your radar missile advantage, right? You bait them up high kind of thing. Because if you don't, and you find yourself in a merge with a Gripen in an F-15, well, he basically does every single thing better than you, and he has unlimited flares, and he's a smaller target, so good luck with that. That's why you kind of want to use the Sparrows to try and keep them at arm's length, if you can. But anyway, this is the last clip I have here, and I was firing at someone on the deck. I thought I was firing at the guy in front of me, but because the HUD on the F-15 can be a little bit hard to read sometimes, I ended up sort of not going for the guy I actually wanted to, and I was super lucky that that guy didn't have Sparrows, or at least didn't decide to use them on me, because I would have been absolutely screwed. I was a little bit fast, so I decided to go into the vertical. Obviously, I dumped all of my speed immediately because we're up at 27,000 feet, and I'm, again, kind of heavy on fuel. I try and get an ACM lock here. I do get an ACM lock, and I try a very ambitious Fox 2 launch here, but obviously that's just not going to hit even with 40 Gs. I try and sort of get the nose on just as much as I can. I can see he's kind of struggling as well in terms of energy. I'm not going to go up again and try and sort of hang the jet there like I did last time, so I decide to roll over and go from the other side. I do get a launch notification on me. I just hope it's for the enemy. But, yeah, I end up getting taken out by a teammate, which kind of concluded my night there. Final score was about 25-3, obviously with one of those being the team kill. So the F-15, it is good. It doesn't get all the fancy tools like the F-16. It doesn't get a TWS mode. It doesn't get helmet mounted sight. But you don't. While those things can be useful, especially the TWS mode, you don't necessarily need them. And this thing can dogfight as well, really well actually. Just you got to make sure you're below sort of 20 minutes of fuel, otherwise it's not going to work. But anyway, thank you very much for watching. This link to the Discord is in the description if you're interested in joining that. But other than that, I hope to see you in the next video. Cheers.